Hey y'all, Miss Adventure here, and welcome to Teach Time in the afternoon, where I talk about my ripe critical knowledge building system so you can bring more depth and critical learning to your class. Because I know you're already doing it, but this system is designed to help you make more space in your class for lessons that really matter. So, yesterday we went ahead and dived into what revere means. The very first step in critical knowledge building is to revere knowledge. And we talked about how it's more than just revering knowledge, but it's actually an attitude that you take up as an educator in general toward not just knowledge, but your students and your entire classroom setup as well. So today we're going to be talking about bringing imagination into the classroom and why that's so important and isn't really being done much. We don't leave much room right now for creativity, and imagination really is the best word. Imagining. We don't have much room for things like that. Make believe, made up, fantasy, fiction. With all those standardized tests and stuff, it's really squeezed the fun out of schooling. And this is going to help bring it back. Imagination is meant to be a part of the knowledge building process, and we'll talk about why. So let me go ahead and grab this poster down off the wall. We talked yesterday about how these are super helpful for your classroom because not only will they be reminders for you to engage in these learning verbs? These are actions that you're going to take, revering, imagining, problematizing, and enhancing with the ripe knowledge building system. But they're actually super useful for you to have readily available for your students to access and for you to gesture and point to. You might notice that I gesture to my learning resources on the wall all the time. And you could too with these, especially because down here at the bottom, I'm kind of skipping ahead. We have on all of these posters, there's a past, present, and future because these are grounded in a historical timeline. It's really important to see knowledge as a narrative, as part of a story. It has a past, it has a present, and it has a future. And this story, when we present knowledge that way as a story that's alive with a human past, a human present, and a human future, there's so much more depth that we can gain from our classroom discussion. So for imagining, this is all about exploring the creative dimensions of the lesson. So no matter what you're presenting, let's say you're presenting science or math, there is room for imagination in those things because there's always space with when we're imagining, we're not just looking at what is. We're looking at what is not. We're looking at the negative space. And I'm actually going to be talking about that in the weeks to come, how people tend to think of the critical approach because it's has to do with critics. It must be negative. It's so negative. Being critical, and it can be, right? Negativity, absolutely. Or being critical can be too negative. But that's critical done wrong. If we learn in school how to do critical right, then we won't fall into those traps. So, what we're going to be doing now is, even with, oh gosh, I kind of lost my train of thought. I might edit that part out. What the heck was I talking about? Completely lost that train. Okay, that's fine. So, imagination. Oh, negativity, negative space. No wonder I was blasting off into negative space myself. Okay, so people tend to think that the critical approach is negative. It's super negative. And actually, that's a misunderstanding. And I'm going to talk about it more, as I said, in the next couple weeks. The negative actually is talking about negative space. The critical tradition is all about what's being left out of the discussion. What aren't we talking about? Often that's just as important as what we are talking about. So that's where imagination really comes into play. So why does this math work the way it does? Why does this science work the way it does? Well, it could have been other ways. Why wouldn't those ways work? What doesn't work? If this does work, what doesn't? And when we explore what doesn't work in math and in science, then we'll begin to understand more of the value, and we can revere more about what math and science really is when we understand what it is not. So that's what imagination is all about, my friends. Thank you for being patient with me when I lose my train of thought. Okay, so exploring the creative dimensions of the lesson, which means we're looking outside of what we traditionally look at as educators. So we would envision all the ways this knowledge could be different. We can change the past, change the story of this knowledge, maybe the math. Who are the people behind this mathematical thing that you're teaching? Who are the people who discovered these ideas? Because I promise you, it was a person who figured it out. The math you're teaching has a human story. You'll need to uncover it. The critical approach does take a whole new type of lesson planning, because you're going to have to look at things outside of in more of the realm of imagination. You have to really know what is in the realm of reality. So you're going to need to know, what is the past of this lesson? What has it been doing? And I'm going to go ahead and say that that's going to give you a much richer understanding of how to present this to your students in a meaningful way anyway, when you understand the history behind what you're teaching anyway. So you can only change the past if you know the past. You can redesign the present. So how can we imagine this knowledge being taken up in different ways today? That is a vital question that can bring up a lot of meaningful topics of discussion. And then we can shift the future. So if we kept knowledge exactly the same, we can kind of predict what the future might look like. But, what if knowledge were different? If we did redesign the present, how would that potentially shift the future? These are exciting possibilities. All right, so imagination. You guys, imagination. Bring it to your classroom today with the RIPE critical learning system. Not going to put it back. It's too high, but I am going to do what I do every Wednesday, starting today. From now on, we're going to be pulling an imagination card from my knowledge of the people, by the people, for the people. We've got a lot of cards and a lot of philosophy behind imagination. It isn't just because I want to have fun and do creative stuff with kids. There's actual theory and justification behind imagination. It's actually a much richer theoretical conversation than kids should strengthen their creative muscles. Yeah, they should. But there's more to it than that. So let's figure out what more there is. Plop the cards in. Give it a shake, give it a shake. Knowledge of the people, by the people, for the people. I should make a song. I'm shaking every day, twice a day. Okay, so what do we have here? Myles Horton. He is a fantastic educator who actually started this school for citizenship that many Black civil rights leaders went to before they really began to organize for the civil rights movement. Rosa Parks, for example, was one of his students. Okay, let's go ahead and read this. It's not super clear. Okay. You've got your wagon hitched to a star, but you can't haul anything in it that's not down on earth. You have to have it hitched to the star. But it's also got to be down on earth where something practical can be done. You have to tie the practical with the visionary. So, what he's saying here in a great book, by the way, Myles Horton, We Make the Road by Walking, which is a book that him and Paulo Freire, the founding father, though he didn't like that term, the founding father of critical education, they talked a book together where they did a whole book through discussion. And it's a really, really great book for teachers. I super recommend it. And he was talking about imagination in his life with this quote: "You've got to have your wagon hitched to a star." Okay. So imagination is really, I feel like, where between reverence and imagination, these two, I really do like how there is a lot of alignment, like in the actual physical layout. Because the two on top, I would say, these reverence and imagination are two critical pieces to fueling hope. Reverence helps us see what gives us hope from the past and the present, and imagination fuels our hope from a different source, from a more inner place where we construct our own sense of hope. And it's more independent, and it's more, instead of what others did, this hope is ours and ours alone. And that's where imagination really comes in, for hope. And so Myles says that you've got to tie anything you do, including our academic subjects, to a star. It's got to be tied with the visionary. And you can't see beyond what is unless you've strengthened your imaginary muscles. That's funny. Imagination muscles. Until you strengthen those muscles, you're not going to be able to see beyond what's the good that's already been done. But with imagination, you can take things to the next step. You can bring it into the future in a new way that's fueled by your independent sense of hope and understanding. So let's see. What else did I want to say? Oh, okay. So maybe I should look at my notes on the back because I have written things down. Okay. So what I have for the general theme is actualize. So, oh, this is exciting. So actualization is about linking the abstract in our minds with the material. This morning, if you want to catch my Colors of Critical live show, which is for just adults, this one's for educators specifically, but for anyone who wants to be a better critical thinker, the Colors of Critical live show every morning is for that. Today, we talked about consequences and how everything we do impacts the material realm, the realm of matter, material, the real world. And so actualization is about that bridge between the imagination, the mind, the abstract, and the material, right? There's a connection there. Humans have this incredible ability to take what's in our mind and make it a reality. It was once imaginary. Everything, go ahead and look around you. If you're looking at something that is man-made, human-made, I prefer that. If you're looking at something that's human-made, it was once just an idea in someone's head, and then they actualized it. They hitched their wagon to a star. They had an idea, and then they made it real. They tied the visionary, they saw beyond what was, and they made it real. And then all of a sudden, it was. So that's why imagination is so critical. And the fact that we're not doing it in schools speaks to the fact that we're not teaching people how to continue this great legacy of actualizing amazing things. If we don't teach kids how to follow this bridge between imagination and the real, how to make those moves from your mind out into the real world, especially when they're fused with creativity and hope and all those great things. If we're not doing that in school, what are we doing? We're just going to keep repeating what already is. And if people had done that in the past, look around at all these things we wouldn't have if people had just kept what is. We have to go beyond. And imagination is a big part of that. So, hopes and dreams matter. Hopes and dreams matter and need to be part of the knowledge building dialogue. They have to be. And the final piece, when something is critical, it can only be critical if you take real world action. On Fridays, I'm going to talk about empowerment, which is the hugely important, critical value of action. It's super important. And that's what Myles is talking about here. Not only do you have to have it hitched to a star, you've got to see beyond, be reaching for something outside of your grasp that isn't yet in this realm. You're reaching beyond this realm, but it's got to be tied down on earth where something practical can be done. We can't spend all our time imagining. Just like we can't spend all our time revering, then we would never notice problems or enhance upon the good things that already are. We cannot spend all of our time imagining, but gosh darn it, we've got to spend some of our time imagining, or we're not going to do anything new. We're not going to do anything innovative if we can't imagine. So bring imagination to your classroom. I'm sure you already do, but I can tell you, when I was in the classroom for 5 years, there was a serious lack. I tried to make space for that kind of thing, but how often did I really? It's really hard to do when you don't have a structure helping you do it. And so the RIPE critical learning system is here to be your backbone, your critical backbone, to help you be the beating heart of your classroom. You put the meat and the heart on all these lessons. You really add to it. But this is the structure from which you can really cultivate meaningful classroom lessons with your students. So I'm excited for you to start imagining more in your classroom with imagination and the RIPE critical learning system. Okay, I think that's all for today. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about problematize. Ooh. People aren't going to like this one because let me tell you that we don't do much problematizing of knowledge in traditional schools. This one's going to rub some people the wrong way. But I got to tell you, it's got to be done. You can watch my video yesterday where I talked about how E.B. White had a great quote about how, look, it would be super easy if the world let me just enjoy it. It's so beautiful. I would love to spend my life in reverence. That'd be great. Unfortunately, there are lots of things about the world that I want to change and that desperately need to be transformed because they are dehumanizing and atrocious. So there are some things that need to be problematized. And guess what? Even if we got rid of all the atrocities, there would still be things to problematize because, I don't know, for all those people who problematize is going to rub the wrong way. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'm sure I'll talk about this plenty tomorrow. But humans aren't perfect. I don't know if that's a lesson that I just dropped on you all of a sudden. Maybe you should have had that lesson in elementary school or in your public school setting or private school. That's fine. If you're private school, you can take this too. But this is made for public educators, but we'll talk more about that later. But go ahead. Others, everyone, all educators are welcome, of course. But humans aren't perfect. So even if we did get rid of all the dehumanizing things we do, which I do think is possible, we will still fail. We will still make mistakes. We are always going to be limited. We are always going to be fallible. And we're always going to screw up. So there will always be a need to problematize. There will always be some kind of human weakness in everything we do. It's just kind of how human stuff goes, So we got to prepare the kiddos for the human and not just have them revere all the time. But the big one today is imagination. So, yay, bring this to your classroom. as soon as this goes on sale on Friday. Can't wait for you to get your hands on this. I will see you tomorrow when we talk about problematic things. I will see you then. Bye.